Every child deserves a life free of meanness, but Billy was as mean as snot. Billy was my wife's tormentor, and little boys don't always know how to express their feelings of affection towards little girls, and it comes in the form of a dirt clod thrown in their general direction. Had she lived in my neighborhood at the time, I might have rode over on my bike and helped vanquish Billy, but I was 150 miles away. The second grade interaction has stuck around. We remember it now with a smile, but mostly for its meanness. One of my tormentors, a boy named Yale, terrorized my walks home from Maple Grove Elementary for months. He was a tall, skinny, white blonde-headed boy who was apparently really, really fast because he was always one step ahead of me. And despite my cunning third grade wits that formed intricate and varied patterns home, he always seemed to find me and beat the crap out of me. Kurt was an oversized neighborhood boy who would throw dirt in your face or steal your marbles that your grandpa gave you, or rip the head off your favorite G.I. Joe, rendering him useless to use his kung fu grip because he couldn't see to pick anything up. I tell you these stories because I remember the meanness. In my hometown of Lansing, Vandevort's, the largest sporting goods store in the area, would hold a Blem sale. Blem merchandise was imperfect for the perfect. Small tears, stains, the ugly stuff that they couldn't sell normally. But held once a year, it would give the poor kids a chance to look like the cool kids, as long as you didn't look too close. The dream this particular year was a silky, golden Adidas warm-up jacket and a pair of white leather pro model Adidas tennis shoes. The shoe in which was introduced in the year in which I was born was still the shoe to have in 1981. And I wasn't the only one who wanted these price kicks. My mom would drop my dad off at his General Motors job where he worked for 46 years. And we'd make the front of the massive warehouse to be among the first in line for the best stuff. Skipping school, we knew that we were risking life and limb at the front of this stampede, but we were after good Blem. The doors opened at 7 and we frantically searched the objects of our desire. Unfortunately, reality was a bit different. The shoes were canvas, the jacket a flimsy nylon, but it still had a logo on it. I loved the way that jacket made me feel. It was a robin egg blue, not the silky golden that I coveted, but it had a cool little pocket in the front where you could put stuff and hide it from the teacher. I probably suited up with that outfit the very next day, trying to gain the adoration of my friends, but it didn't quite cut it. Didn't matter though. I liked how it made me feel. It made me feel special, cool, not like an outsider any longer. I couldn't have a lot, but it was something that I had. Tracy was a muscly, 7th grade, knife-toting smoker who rode my bus and ruled our neighborhood. He was just flat out mean. Every day I would try and get to my stop, run down the street, down the steep hill to our rented duplex, and just stay off his radar screen. One day, I didn't make it. The bus was hot that day, unbearably so, and probably for the first time, I took off my robin egg blue status symbol and tucked it away and spent the rest of the bus trip mostly misbehaving for our bus driver, Bruce. When we approached my stop, I went to grab my new jacket, and it wasn't there. I looked in the backpack, I looked under the backpack. It was only when I looked under the seat that I started to hear the laughter of Tracy and his sick, twisted humor and those who were in on his brand of evil that day. When I popped up, my jacket forcefully met my face, reunited. And much like the long, pull-away shots in the movie where the truth is revealed to a solitary figure, my inner cinematographer began to focus on the shreds of fabric in my hand. Tracy, with his knife and a few flicks of his wrist, had destroyed the object that I wished to define me. I managed to get off the bus that day and unscathed and run home. I told my parents some story about how I lost my jacket. Never told them the truth of what had happened. Do you remember your Tracy? It's not the type of trauma on the battlefield that Jean-Paul Marie talks about in his TEDx Can talk from 2015 about the void of death or seeing something that you're not supposed to see and the importance of talking about it. There was no PTSD associated with this childhood events, but nonetheless, for me it was a loss. A piece of my childhood cut away. We'd probably, almost certainly, define Tracy and Gail's behavior as bullying, purposeful action over time to diminish another socially or physically or emotionally. But back then, the conventional wisdom was, it's part of growing up. What did you do to make him mad? It'll build character. I disagree. I tell you this story because 30 years later in my 6th grade classroom, these feelings became familiar again, and I wasn't going to let meanness become a memory for my kids. In the beginning part of the year in 2016, we don't spend a whole lot of time learning the stuff you're supposed to learn in school. We have to spend the next 10 months in a 650 square foot room with 30 6th grade bodies and a middle-aged man, and we better figure out how to learn together and feel safe. So we don't do a lot of reading and writing and math. We learn about each other. It was an amazing school year, a memorable group for sure, but when we returned from spring break that year, there was a change. There was more tears, more frustration. Maybe it was the fact that these kids in an elementary school had spent the last 7 years looking at the same faces and they were just tired of each other. Or they were already looking on to the next step in their academic career, our middle school. But whatever the source, there was a definite erosion of community, and I panicked a little. I looked at the calendar. We still had 2 months to learn from each other, grow together. So when I went home that weekend, I went out for a bike ride, which a good friend of mine likes to characterize my bike rides as a way to solve the world's problem. If we could just get Obama and Putin or Captain Hook and his arch nemesis out for a bike ride, we could end the hostilities in Neverland. So after I got home, the ideas that had been spinning in unison with my pedals for 3 hours, I jotted them down and impatiently waited for Monday morning. I think I had a plan to help the kids make a connection between the choices that they were making today and how they'll be remembered. So in the middle of our morning routine, I took our largest whiteboard space, 15-foot whiteboard, and I cleared all the magnets and the posters and the writing, and I cleared it off, which was kind of unusual for them because I never did this type of menial task in front of them. Learning time's too important, and I would never spend time cleaning, and they just didn't realize that they were learning in a different way. I deflected questions as to what I was doing and why the board was clear until Tuesday when meanness made an appearance. We talked about what that is, what it means to them, and where it comes from. And then the next morning, I wrote down every mean word, every level of vitriol that I could think of, well, almost every word I could think of, on our learning space. And symbolic by happenstance, just because they were the most common colors in my dry erase tray, the black and blue words came to represent the physical pain that meanness can sometimes turn into. We were surrounded by meanness, and we spent the day talking about why is it harder to forget about the bad sometimes and remember the good. We talked, we listened. On Thursday, I asked the question that I would ask countless times over the next 4 years. How do you want to be remembered? On Friday, because brain research tells us that we remember something better when there's an emotion attached to it for the first time ever, I told my story of Tracy and Yale. I remembered. And after telling my story, I grabbed an eraser and I grabbed a colored marker and I walked over to one of our mean words and I erased it and replaced it with the word love. And I turned to my students and I asked them for help. And over the next 15 minutes, we literally erased meanness and replaced it with kindness. And then again, I don't know if I've ever been prouder or more happy with my kids. It was powerful, impactful, personal. Later in the day, one of my students noticed that we didn't get rid of all of the meanness, but we made a difference. The students taught me. I wrote about it on my blog and shared it with teachers, whoever wanted to read it. And I was amazed at what came back towards me. Teachers from all over the world had adapted and used the lesson in their classroom and shared with the difference that it made for their lives. And I was fine with that. I was just glad to be making a difference for my 30 kids and whoever wanted to use my little lesson. Until the summer of 2014, when I found I had some time on my hands. Man and machine, I only weigh 200 pounds. And I was broken by the impatience of a 4,000-pound vehicle that invaded my 44-centimeter space and left on the side of the road. 44 centimeters. Maybe that's too much to ask, or maybe a bike ride isn't the answer to all of our problems. So, with an arm that was hard to lift up without the use of my other arm, or the ability to remember where I left that dish towel that I was holding in my hands but had spent looking all over the house for it, I decided to try and broaden Erase Meanness' message. I bought a domain, I bought a domain, created a website. I took artsy pictures of pencils and erasers on my dining room floor. It was a risk, to be sure. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a chance to make the world kinder, so I jumped off a cliff. I wanted the efforts to be for something, for kindness, for empathy. I didn't want to be an anti-organization. There's too many people out here telling us what they're against. I wanted to be for something. These efforts are great, and I applaud anybody that's trying to make the world better, but what does this say to Tracy or Yale? Their meanness comes from somewhere. They need to be shown a better way. In the movie Reject, we learn that social rejection almost always leads to shame and rage. I wanted Erase Meanness to be an eraser of meanness, a promoter of kindness, an organization, kindness curators, and kindness creators. I believe that everybody is capable of kindness, and the choices that we make on a daily basis makes a difference. Meanness is universal, but so is kindness. We know this intuitively. But researchers at Harvard and the University of British Columbia tell us that when we're nice to others, we feel happier. The happier we are, the more likely we are to be kind, resulting in this kind of infinite kindness loop. What a great place to get stuck. It's not about combating meanness. The way to make us happier is by being kind. We have to erase meanness by replacing it with kindness, by purposeful action. Random acts of kindness are great, but we can't depend on random. It has to be intentional. We can't be worried about the statistics of bullying incidents in our schools or how it looks to the outside. We must be worried about our kids. We can't wait for the toxic words of rejection and meanness to be digested and then treat the symptoms of their poisoning. Communities of kindness are formed by intentional action from teachers and parents and administrators. We have to move beyond acceptance, beyond tolerance, and towards acceptance. We have to strive for empathy. We need to start with kindness. Always kindness. For that is how you'll be remembered. Every child deserves a life free of meanness. Billy was as mean as snot, but he didn't have to be.